Dad, honestly, I think you would be safer in a facility. Hearing those words from my own son felt like the ground beneath me had suddenly vanished. A facility. That is just a polite word for a waiting room for the end. To him, it was a safety measure. To me, it sounded like a prison sentence. But look at me now. I am not in a nursing home. I am not being watched by a nurse 24 hours a day. I am sitting in my own favorite armchair, drinking my own coffee, in my own house. And the best part? My entire support system cost me less than $500 a month. My name is Arthur Miller. I am 75 years old. For 4 decades, I sat in boardrooms making million-dollar decisions. I was a man who commanded respect. But after my wife passed away 7 years ago, the silence in this big house became deafening. Suddenly, I wasn't the boss anymore. I was just an old man who was starting to forget where he put his glasses. I know many of you watching this feel the exact same way. You look in the mirror and wonder, is this it? Is my only option to become a burden to my children or a number in a system? Society tells us we have to choose between safety and freedom. But I'm here to tell you that society is wrong. Before I share the solution that saved my life, please click that subscribe button. This channel is about refusing to let age define our worth. And trust me, the story I am about to tell you might just be the blueprint you have been looking for. So, let me explain how I rejected the nursing home, fired the caregivers, and built a life that is richer than anything money could buy. It all started with a slippery floor and a moment of panic. One evening, I was stepping out of the shower when my foot lost its grip. It was a small slip, nothing broken. No hospital visit, but that night, lying in bed with my heart racing, the question haunted me, what if next time I cannot get up? That fear led me to my first attempt at a solution, moving in with my son and his family. At first, it felt like a dream. The house was full of life, and the grandkids were always nearby. But after a while, I realized I had become a ghost in their hallways. My son and his wife were working long hours, and the kids were constantly at school or sports. I was surrounded by people, yet I felt more alone than ever. Then came the night I overheard my daughter-in-law on the phone. Her voice was thick with fatigue as she said, "I know he is family, but honestly, it is exhausting. I cannot even go shopping without worrying." Those words were a wake-up call. I realized then that living with your children does not cure loneliness. Sometimes, it just makes the feeling worse because you are right there, yet you feel completely in the way. I moved back home and tried the second traditional option, hiring a part-time caregiver. I met Linda, who was professional and kind, but the math simply did not work. She cost $4,000 a month. My Social Security check was only $2,200. I was watching my life savings drain away just to have someone else wash my dishes and run my errands. But it was more than just the money, it was the loss of my domain. I have always liked my kitchen cleaned a certain way, right after breakfast. Linda preferred to do it later. It sounds like a small detail, but when you have spent 40 years as an executive making your own decisions, having to negotiate your own routine in your own home feels like losing your dignity piece by piece. Finally, I tried the facility my son suggested, $3,000 a month for a clean room and medical staff. It sounded like the responsible thing to do. But within days, the walls started closing in. They had a schedule for everything. Breakfast at 7:30, lunch at noon, and the most insulting part, lights out at 9 o'clock. I remember one beautiful, clear evening. I wanted to step outside just to breathe the night air and look at the stars. A staff member stopped me at the door and said, "Mr. Miller, outdoor time ended at 7. It is safety policy." Safety. That word was becoming my prison. I have managed multi-million-dollar budgets and led thousands of employees. I have been making my own decisions for 7 decades. And here was a stranger telling me when I was allowed to look at the sky. That was the moment I knew I had to leave. I would rather struggle for my independence at home than be safe in a cage. When I walked out of that facility, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. But the reality of my situation was still waiting for me at home. I was back in my own space, but the stairs were still steep. The light bulbs still needed changing, and the silence was still there. I had tried everything the experts suggested, and none of it worked. Then, one afternoon, everything changed because of a chance encounter at the park near the elementary school. I was sitting on a bench, just watching the world go by, when I saw Sarah. She lives in my building, a young mother, always in a rush, always looking like she is carrying the weight of the world. She was pacing back and forth, clutching her phone, her face tight with stress. I overheard her saying, "I can't leave work early again. My boss already gave me a warning." She looked like she was about to break. I knew her situation, a husband who travels for work and a 6-year-old daughter, Emma, who needed to be picked up. Without really thinking about it, I stood up and walked over. I said, "Sarah, I walk past this school every single day at 3 o'clock. If you need someone to pick up Emma and walk her home, I would be happy to help." She looked at me, completely startled. "Oh, Arthur, I couldn't possibly ask you to do that." I looked her in the eye and said, "You aren't asking. I am offering." That was the moment the tide turned. The next day, I was there at the gate. When Emma saw me, her face lit up. We walked home slowly, and she told me everything about her first grade class, her teacher, and her drawings. For the first time in years, I wasn't the patient or the burden. I was the person someone was counting on. I wasn't just taking up space, I was providing a service that was desperately needed. That evening, there was a knock on my door. It was Sarah, holding a warm plate of roasted chicken and vegetables. She said, "I made extra dinner, and I want you to have this. You saved my job today, Arthur." I tried to refuse, but she insisted. "Let me help you, because you are helping me." This was the birth of what I call our interdependence model. It wasn't a business transaction, it was a community. Because I pick up Emma, Sarah never lets my fridge go empty. When my kitchen faucet started leaking a week later, Sarah's husband didn't just give me a plumber's number, he came over with his toolbox and fixed it himself. While he worked, we sat and talked. He asked me for advice on a conflict he was having at his office, and I realized my 40 years of executive experience weren't useless. I was mentoring him. I realized then that I didn't need a $4,000 a month caregiver to manage my life. I needed a neighbor who cared. I was no longer a man waiting for his life to end. I was a man who mattered to the people living right next door. What I discovered through my friendship with Sarah and her family changed my entire philosophy on aging. I realized that the experts had given me a false set of choices. After reflecting on this journey, I have distilled everything I learned into 4 golden rules that I believe every senior needs to hear. The first lesson is to find the middle ground. For the longest time, I thought my only options were total independence, struggling alone in a quiet house, or total dependence in a facility. But there is a third way. It is called interdependence. You can accept help with your groceries or your repairs without giving up the keys to your life. You can let people into your world without letting them take it over. You do not have to choose between being a hermit and being a patient. The second lesson is that community is far more valuable than money. I was spending $4,000 a month on professional caregivers, and yet I felt like a stranger in my own kitchen. Now, I spend less than $500 a month on my basic needs, and I feel wealthier than I have in years. Why? Because money buys you a service, but it cannot buy you a relationship. A paid caregiver follows a clock. A neighbor follows a heart. When Sarah brings me a meal, it is not because it is 6 o'clock. It is because she knows I am part of her family's life. Third, you must realize that you still have something valuable to give. I spent years thinking that because I was slowing down, I was becoming worthless. I was wrong. My age did not take away my value. It just changed what I have to offer. I have time, which is the one thing young parents like Sarah and her husband lack. I have a lifetime of experience and a listening ear. Whether it is walking a child home or giving career advice to a young professional, your presence still matters. You are not a sunset, you are a resource. Finally, Never forget that your health is the foundation of your freedom. I realize that as long as I can walk to that school gate, I am a free man. If I let my body fail, my choices disappear. This is why I stay active. I do not walk just for exercise. I walk because it is my currency for independence. Taking care of your physical strength is not about vanity. It is about keeping the door to your own home open. By following these 4 rules, I stopped being a man who was managed and started being a man who was integrated. I found a way to stay in my home, keep my dignity, and save my savings, all while finding a sense of purpose that a nursing home could never provide. Today, I am 75 years old. I live alone in my own home, but I am not lonely. I am not a resident in a ward, and I am not a name on a medical chart. Every morning, I wake up with a purpose. I know that at 3 o'clock, a little girl is waiting for me at the school gate. I know that my neighbors are looking out for me, just as I am looking out for them. I am living my life, not just waiting for it to end. My final advice to you is this: stop looking at the narrow path society has paved for you. They will tell you that aging means withdrawing, that it means being cared for, and that it means disappearing. But you do not have to follow that script. Do not look at what you can no longer do. Look at what you can still contribute to the community right outside your front door. Whether it is a skill you have honed for decades or simply the gift of your time, you have something that someone nearby is praying for. True independence is not about doing everything by yourself. It is about being part of a circle where everyone gives and everyone receives. When you find that circle, the cost of living drops and the quality of life soars. You regain your seat at the table of life. I want to hear from you now. What is your plan for your golden years? Have you found a way to stay connected? Or is there a small way you could start sharing what you have with a neighbor today? Maybe you have a skill to teach, or perhaps you could be the listening ear a young person needs. Please, leave a comment below and let's start a conversation. Thank you for watching. And remember, your best years are not behind you. They are happening right now, as long as you choose to live them on your own terms.